So our introduction for Java to Java for FRC, session 4. This is our November 8th session, wherein we will look at the installation of the software. That's Windows. We will explore a little bit about Git, a little bit more than we did before. We'll talk a little bit more about two more interactive parts of our coding for this series. It's a little bit difficult with a remote group with certain limitations to get interaction going. And so to address this, we've created this Coopertition, which will be gradually revealed as we go through each session. And one other plan is for us to have some interactive testing with robot code. So we're hoping to have a few volunteers around the province who may have access to a robot, and we may be able to organize a live session where the students and coding participants may write some code, incorporate it into a pre-existing code base that works on a robot, and then test it out. And this will help us with the whole cycle of try and then reflect and then adjust. And this will allow us to also appreciate how the whole process of coding for the robot goes. There's the outline for this evening. Our schedule again from October to February. We're still in our introductory phase. And we're hoping that as these few first sessions go on, you're installing FRC Java and all the associated libraries and software in the meantime. And please feel free to reach out if you need some assistance in installing these. Later, of course, we're doing our intermediate and advanced sessions, perhaps at the end of December and into January and February. So last time we spoke about FRC coding and learning the language, which is something like grammar, and then problem solving. That's an application of the computer language, something like maybe writing poetry or literature. The problem solving is a little bit more connected between the different elements of the language. You're applying the language and multiple elements thereof to make little programs. And we have a Java program design. We looked at classes, methods, variables, and libraries. And of course, last time we announced our Coopertition, and we'll have a little bit more about that this evening. Only one adjustment to our overall big picture this week. For the last few weeks, this diagram has been gradually developing. We have our competition robot with the Roborio, which contains Java in most cases. And we have a radio, the wireless connection to the driver station computer. And possibly on some of the more advanced robots, we have a Python instance running in a Raspberry Pi coprocessor. Well, that's one way to do it. And you have an Arduino that you may use to generate the green light that comes out of the vision LED. This green light bounces off of some retroreflective elements on the game field. Retroreflective elements, they make the light bounce exactly in a straight line back from where it came. And this allows the camera to pick up a very strong green image in the location of the field elements, and then it can process them and determine if those are the field elements it needs to target. So this is one more element of our programming deployment. There's a small Arduino program, which is based on the C language that's required to get this little piece running. So largely you can copy and paste it from the internet, and after installing a few libraries for the Arduino, it will work. Of course, we have GitHub. We're going to speak a little bit more about that this evening, about how to initialize and update a GitHub repository and then share it on another computer. And on the computer, of course, we have our driver station and we have our VS Code. We probably won't see the driver station for a while, but we will look a little bit at VS Code tonight and hopefully install it on a Windows computer. All right, so that's our big vision of where we're going. Just checking here if, oops, sorry. If we have any Oh yes, here we are, some additional participants, just letting them in. Great. All right, this slide is from before, just a little slightly updated version of this slide as we introduce the basic features of Java and referred the participants to numerous online tutorials to fill in the blanks and the additional details. And it's a good idea to at least have a working knowledge of Java to get started in the robot programming, as you need to use those elements actively in writing your robot programs. And then using the basic elements of Java to construct Java programs. That was last week's theme. And we're now increasingly linking the examples and discussion to the FRC specific elements of Java. And that's where we're heading. So let's get into it. This evening, I'm going to go through the process of installing the software that you require for the robot programming. And for this, I have a Windows computer this evening. If any of you has a Mac and would like to see the process done on a Mac, I'd be very happy to arrange that, as we also have a Mac here. We could do that next week. There are only slight differences. What I will do, I'm going to switch over sharing to my Windows computer, and we will take a look at how the installation process goes. So let me just do a stop share here. And we should be able to, we have someone on a Mac, that's quite fine. And we'll take a look at the website links, and you can try to download it. And we may be able to, even at the end of the session, help you to install it if you start downloading now. It is a fairly big download. It's between 1.5 and 1.7 gigabytes, depending on the computer system you have. So yeah, if any of you would like some assistance in installing, we can do that at the end of the session this evening. So I am going to install the software from GitHub. And the reason for that is if you don't, it doesn't really work so well. There may be a reason for your question over here, and I'd like to hear some more context to that question if there's an issue. So thank you. Here we go. I'm going to share my screen now on my Windows computer. And we'll just go to a browser. And we'll search for FRC control system. And usually that's the first one that comes up, docs.wpilib.org. And here we are at the landing page of the first robotics competition control system. A really good issue to be aware of is the updates to the various elements of the software. As the season progresses, there are sometimes updates to certain elements of the software, and it is a good idea to keep your software base updated where possible. So I see there's a really interesting question as well. One of our participants here already has the Visual Studio Code on the Mac. But what I have found, last year I was installing on various computers, and one time I just tried to install Visual Studio Code on a fresh computer, but not from the control system. Later, I found that I was missing some key components, if I recall correctly. So if anyone has an experience of installing VS Code and then WPILib on top of it, I'd be very happy to know. The method I've seen here from the website tends to take care of these issues. So we'll see what happens. And another thing that happens, the WPILib installs on in a directory each year that is parallel to previous year's directory, so you don't have to uninstall last year's versions. especially like in January, we're going to see quite likely an update to many of the software packages. And you can install the 2022 package alongside the 2021 package. But just to be aware, you have to make sure you're linked to the correct package as you're doing your coding. All right, so we can explore some of these issues as there are numerous computer configurations. There are sometimes unforeseen issues in setting up these libraries, and that's why we're taking a little time this evening to see if we can go through some of the questions. So if possible, during these next few sessions, install the software that we're speaking about, and then we'll see if we can address some specific issues that come up, because it's not quite possible to anticipate all of them. All right. Okay, so you don't have to uninstall anything. It's the same process. So there's someone here who is Mehir has installed WPI lib on Windows. Okay, that's good. I'm going to just go through the process here. There are some ideas about building your robot in step 1, but we're going to step 2 this evening as we're focusing on coding. So here's our step 2, installing software. And here is a page where it's a good idea to understand a few of the elements of the coding process with respect to also driving the robot. If you would like to drive your team's robot, you're going to have to install the LabVIEW, or the FRC game tools, which I believe are based on LabVIEW. So you'll have to install the game tools. They include the driver station and some other configuration tools to help get your robot connected to the code and to the computer. This evening, though, we are focusing on the WPI lib installation guide, as that is going to allow us to do the basic coding. And when you're finished the coding, then you can use a repository such as GitHub to share it with your driver station computer, and everything should work seamlessly. So I'm clicking on the WPI lib installation guide. And you'll note there are numerous side notes for users of various operating systems. For example, you need to have an update if you're using Windows 7. There are specific instructions for Windows 10, Windows 7, Mac OS, and Linux on the idea of extracting the installer. So what I did before the session, I went to GitHub and I did the download. A few times I've tried this process. I've been scanning, trying to find out where do you download it. You have to look carefully. It's just in this link here. So the downloading the latest release of the installer is from GitHub. Here's the main page of the GitHub repository where we can see the code for the WPI lib installer. So there's all of the directories and files for the WPI lib. It's open source and you can dig into it and understand what they've been doing to put together our robot coding library. I'm going back here now to the page on which we link from the link on this page. Here we go. And if you read, you can see what's in our repository, new changes and things like this. And then we come down to all of the download files, and you'll note that they're quite large. So I actually pre-downloaded the Windows one. Be aware of the difference between the 32-bit and 64-bit. Most people have a 64-bit computer these days. Just to make sure, you can always go to your system. You right-click on your Windows, find your system, and you can see here the system is a 64-bit operating system. So that's an issue for Windows computers. So I downloaded the 64-bit ISO file, which is like a CD drive image, although we don't have CD drives that much anymore, or DVD drives. It's still in the format of such a drive, the ISO file, and we have to do something special on Windows to do that. So we can just imagine that we click here, go for a coffee, do some exercise, come back, and after quite some time, depending on your download speed, you will find the file in your downloads folder. And here's my downloads folder here, and the WPI lib Windows 64, and now it's 1.7 gigabytes once it gets onto here. And we will now, this one is not one that you just left click, double click to open. We're going to right click and get a menu and treat it as if it was a virtual DVD and mount the DVD. There we are. Now we are into our virtual DVD. And if you double click on this installer, I'm just going to try this and see if it will let me. So I already did the installation, but I'll just show you a few of the menu items that come up. I don't know. Oh, there it is. Okay, welcome to the WPI Lib installer. We're going to start the installation. I'm actually not going to install, but here you can do a download the VS Code for a single installed. So I can do a next to skip. I've already done my VS Code, but you would at this point download your VS Code for a single install and have it on the computer. And then you go to next, and you can put all of the check marks, even this one, when you do the installation, and then install for this user should be just fine, unless you want to share the installation with other users on your computer. That's it. I'm not going to do the install now because it's already been done on this computer, but you would just click this and then wait a little bit as it's 1.7 gigabytes or thereabouts. And there you have your WPI Lib installation. If all has gone well, then you will see on your desktop these icons. Now for Mac, it might be a little bit different, and they have some specific directions about that on the website. And if we go back here, we can see some of these specific instructions. Oh, it's a DWG file for Mac OS, and I think you can just double click on those and they will install. And then you select the WPI Lib installer from that package file and then launch the application, and it should just run. And they take you through all of these same steps I just showed you here. All right, takes some time. And once you're finished, it's all good. There are a few little post-installation steps you can do for Linux and or Mac. And then you have a whole suite of software installed. And you may take a look at all of the things that are here. What we're going to focus on in just the next little while is the Visual Studio Code. And we'll get to all of these in due time. All right, now let's see. Imagine that we had just performed the installation. We can do a little test. I see that there's something, a message in the chat. Oh, DMG. Yeah, I thought it should be DMG too. It just says DWG here. I was not entirely sure, as I'm not a frequent Mac user. So that's our basic introduction to installation. Let's now go to our WPI Lib VS Code installation. We should be able to see it come up for the first time here. I'm actually not going to be doing too much with the WPI Lib downloads today. The only thing I'm going to do is focus on whether or not my installation is correct. And we will allow everyone some time to make sure they've installed everything. And we'll use it much more in the next few weeks. So we won't be using the WPI Lib downloads today, except to do this little check that I'm going to do here. So this is the startup of Visual Studio Code. You will want to take a few tutorials on how to use a Visual Studio Code. I learned a lot from my students who had done these tutorials, and they showed me little tips and tricks. It kind of caught me off guard, as I had already become quite familiar with the Eclipse, and I was just getting comfortable with it. And then FRC switched to Visual Studio Code, but then again, that's life and that happens. And so since I'm now comfortable with Visual Studio Code, I bet you that they'll change it soon. Who knows? That happens. And this is good to continue us on our learning pathway. We're going to just learn one of the very most important shortcuts, Control and Shift and P. Oops. What happened there? Well, that was supposed to happen. I'm not sure what's going on. Oh, that's why I'm in the wrong computer. I have two keyboards here. Try that again, Control Shift P. And if all is well, then you should see a list of options that include C and C++, debugging, developer. There should be some Java in there. There's a whole lot of things that you can learn to do. And worry not, you don't have to use all of them. There's only a handful of them that you really have to use at any one time. At the end there, you see the WPI lib. So that's how you know you've installed it correctly if you see this kind of list of options available with Control, Shift, and P. So then I'll try that again, Control and Shift, hold them down, and just P. And the option that I'm looking for is WPI lib, create a new project. I can actually type that in, create, and if I just do that, the only two possibilities are now narrowed down. I'm going to create a new WPI lib project. And you may recall from a previous session, we did this very process. We selected a type of project. I'm going to do it from a template again and a Java template. Let's just do a timed robot. And we can select a base folder, see what kind of folders we have here. I'll just do that right here, documents, and maybe put up a new folder, FRC. There we go, selected that folder. And now I can make a project name, timed robot, example. And put my team number, or my previous team number. Oh, we have someone in the waiting room. There we go. So here's the team number entered here, and we'll generate our project. And it asks me would I like to open the folder. Let's just open up the folder and see where I'm at. And now I have a whole bunch of folders and my project has been created. So again, we're not going to do much with that this evening. All I was doing is just verifying that my software was correctly installed. And we will learn a lot more about the directories and the main.java, the robot.java, particularly in the timed robot. We'll use this robot.java file and we'll do several examples thereof in the future. Now, as I have this file open, it is a good sort of point at which to mention something here. Let's try to make it a little bit bigger for the screen. The set of methods here, these are methods that are already part of the robot class. We have teleop periodic, and we have also test periodic, and we should have at one point autonomous periodic. So what we may do during the next few weeks, once we become more familiar with the structure of these programs, we may give a few examples and then ask you to create the code that will go in here and to go into here, for example. And then we may test it on a live robot, especially if we get a few volunteers to help us with that. And that will help us to understand the connection between the software and the hardware. In order to do that, we have to be really set up all of this information for the specific robot. And so we will look at the various imports that are associated with a specific robot and then create a template for that specific robot. Once that's done, and once you are aware of the names of all of the components on the robot as specified in the Java program, then you can make some custom code for them in these methods. And that's the whole process. So largely, once the robot is set up, most of the work is done, and then you just have to tell the robot what actions to do. That's the vision that we're striving for in our process here. All right, so hopefully each one of you will have had a chance to download and install the Visual or VS Code and the GitHub or the Git program for each of your computers, as we will begin using them more and more in the next few sessions. And speaking of Git, we're going to now switch gears and look at the use of the Git program. So for example, when I make one of these example programs, I'll upload it to Git, and then each of you will have access to the code, and that will be much easier. So some interesting tips on folder and file management. Well, one tip I have for FRC robotics, it is a very good idea to follow the established pattern. They actually manage the folders and files for you. The timed robot is the most easy. They already have the robot.java file in a specific folder, and that's it. So you don't have to manage it as long as you set it up using the WPI lib create a new file or new project shortcut. If not, then you'll notice that there's the source and then the main and then Java and FRC. There's a lot of subfolders that are already selected in the structure for an FRC robotics program. And so if you don't follow that, you'll get a lot of errors because the files will not be in the right place. So I found that's a very good tip. Just stick with the established file pattern. And as an example there, this is the simplest one, as most of the robot code ends up going in the same robot.java file. And just like we did last week, we can also look at a new project from the other template, which is the command-based robot, and make another base folder here. We'll put it into documents in FRC as well. And we'll call this, how about command-based example, team number 6162. And there we go, generate project. There's my other project. And as an example, again, looking at this question about tips on folder and file management, the command-based robot has a subfolder for commands and a subfolder for subsystems, and then 4 main Java files in the main folder, the robot folder. That is one tip. Now, an additional tip, it took me a while to get accustomed to this. I found Visual Studio Code quite confusing at first. And one of the issues was where to put my files and my folders. And I can actually switch between files and folders quite easily. So right now I'm in my command-based robot. Well, what happened to all my code for the timed robot? Well, that's okay. I can now just open this folder, the timed robot folder. And when I open it, then my command-based robot is saved and my timed robot is available. So that's how I switch between the files and folders. So as long as I know where on my computer, I know that I'm keeping my files under the documents and, oh, so many documents there. Didn't realize that. And FRC and command-based and then timed robot examples. So, sorry, documents and FRC, that's the folder in which I'm working, and then I'm keeping all my code here. On my actual computer in which I work, that's my Linux-based computer, I have an additional folder that I use for a Git, and I'll show that in a little bit here. All right, so there's another one. Can I change the installation directory? Yes, you may. Installing it on the D drive. So I have found that installing things on the D drive can be an issue. I know my son had a lot of issues with the software he tried to install on his D drive. I think it is possible. We may have to look that up on GitHub as a program, some programs just work on any drive. Other programs are linked to the operating system and may not work so well on a different drive as they're trying to find operating system settings and variables and such. So I would be very cautious before putting it on the D drive. And I think we could try to look that up on Google and see how VS Code behaves. My first inclination would be to think it wouldn't work as well on the D drive. And enable desktop support when creating a new project. Now that one's also very good to draw attention to. We go back here. When we create our new project and enable desktop support, let's just try that again. I'll create a new project and you'll see down here, enable desktop support. The desktop support is for robot simulation and for certain types of testing of our robot. So you don't have to enable it, but it is a very good thing to enable. And that will allow you to do some simulation if you don't have access to an actual robot. And there we are. So that's a little bit about the process of installing software. I think the whole point was just to show that it's working. Control-Shift-P gets you this set of numerous choices. And we won't go much further with this evening as this is not the central kind of focus of our work. Now, does the Visual Studio Code auto-update libraries? That one, I wonder if we have update. You can do this, check for WPI-lib updates. I don't know about the automatic updates. What you may do though is stay tuned on the control system website, such as the one that's here, and they may announce updates. It may be that they have the automatic updates. I haven't been aware of that because during the season, we end up updating a lot anyway. So that is a good point. You can use the menu though to do an update of the libraries. A good idea to check periodically during the robotics season on this website to see any updates, as they can cause the robotics software to work or not work depending on what you do. Oh, can you show that again, please? Which one are you referring to? Oh, the update. Okay, so if we go back to here, I went to Control-Shift-P and I just typed in update to see if they have one. And there we have Java or WPI-lib, check for WPI-lib updates. There we are. So that's great. Since there's such a lengthy list of options, one of them happened to be update. So that's great. All right, I'm going to switch back to my other computer now. Stop share. And come back here. All right, so if there are some questions at the end of the session this evening, we can do an installation on the Mac by sharing a screen and seeing how that can go. The basics of Git. Now, introducing this topic, I'm just going to advise that the things I show this evening are not necessary for you to learn in terms of being able to use them, but it's good for you to be aware of what's happening in the background in case there's an issue. So I'm going to show how Git works in the background, but then when you're using Git, it's going to be on VS Code, and it should be largely automated. And that's a great question about the, I'm just answering one of the chat questions here. If you already have VS Code, can you add the WPI-lib libraries? I suspect, and I'm not sure about this, the time that I tried that last year, installing VS Code WPI-lib on a separate version of VS Code from the VS Code website. I don't remember that working too well. I may be wrong, but I just have a very bad feeling about that. It may be a good, oh yeah, and if you download it from the extensions tab, you get an older version of WPI-lib because maybe their WPI-lib directories are not updated. That actually may have happened to us as well. And I want to warn about that. There were several times last year and in the previous years when we're not sure why code was not working. And sometimes it can be because you have inadvertently installed an older version of a library, and or you might have the new version of the library, but your internet search page provided you guidance for an older version of the library. A very good thing to double check that you're working in a particular version of the library and that the code sample that you're trying to use also works for that particular library. So just be cautious because updates to code happen such that older code doesn't work on the newer frameworks of the new libraries. And how can we check? And so there's the WPI-lib library installed both VS Code versions. And then the same version. That would be very interesting to see. This is Noah's question. If the sample robot code will actually show without errors on both versions of the VS Code. That would be a good indication as to whether that's going to work. There may be additional elements, though, that came with the FRC VS Code. For example, there's a package called Gradle, which is a file software, library management software, and it may not be installed according to FRC specifications and or other elements. So I'm really cautious about that. So maybe Noah can give us some updates, having tried one or the other of the VS Code versions, and give us some feedback. Now, how can we check what are the various library versions? Let's go back to VS Code here. I'm going to maybe share my screen on the other computer to check. Maybe, oh, actually, I can do that on this computer here. All right, so here's my VS Code, some software I'm working on right now. And maybe I'll just make a new project, create a Java project, and actually WPI-lib, create a new project. There we are. And from a template, Java, command robot, base folder. All right, a new sample command robot, and select that folder and the project name, new sample command. All right, so I'm just looking at if these files, they don't give us any information. However, generally in a program, if we want to know, the Visual Studio Code here is version 1.52.1. That's on my Linux machine. But now let's check on my Windows machine. And it's also 1.52.1, and it's dated, and it has a few other details about that. So that's one way to check the Visual Studio Code. Now, what about the WPI-lib version? So I should be able to go on to Control-Shift-P, WPI-lib, and I wonder what we can find down in here. Oh, WPI-lib help, project information. Ah, there we are, WPI lib extension version 2021-3.1, March 2021. So I'll try that again because that's the first time I actually did that. I went to Control-Shift-P, and then I went to Open Project Information, and it gave me my WPI lib extension version. That would be really great to hear some feedback from the various participants here as to which project versions and which versions of VS Code are working and or not working for you. And there we are. Okay. There's another one in the extension tab. You can also check. So I go down here and WPI lib. Oh yeah, there we are. And there's some information about the installed WPI lib version. Thank you for those in the chat. Some very great details that are being posted here. And good. And Noah has updated us now, putting sample command robot code in the base VS Code install with the extension and the WPI installed version, neither show any errors. So that's a good sign. Maybe that's going to be okay. And great. How do you get the link for downloading WPI lib and VS Code? I'm going to show that just one more time here. We go to our whoops, I'll have to just go here and search for, maybe in a Google search, a FRC control system. And under the FRC control system, it gives us this specific website. It's usually the first one that comes up, and we go to preparing your robot. Sorry, not that. It's actually installing software and installing a WPI lib. WPI lib installation guide. You could probably search for that and then go to the GitHub repository. And the VS Code that you install from these links at the bottom of that page, it comes with an option to download the VS Code plus the WPI lib. So that's just, oh, whoops, I'm not keeping up. Oh, good. So thank you. Everyone is answering questions here in the folders or in the chat as well. Yes, and it is probably safer to stick with the newer version. I love that advice coming out on the chat. Newer versions tend to have overcome the difficulties of the past. Oh, a 4 megabyte memory. Will it work well? That is quite a possibility. I don't think you need all that much. We have used the WPI lib on numerous computers of all different types, old, new, and all of that. And what you can do to see if it will work well, if the computer is going to handle with 4 megabytes of memory or gigabytes maybe, you may want to test, do a system monitor and see how much RAM and disk space is used up as you run the program. Yeah, 4 megabyte is indeed very small. Yeah. So 4 gigabyte is fine, according to one of our participants. That's great. So just try not to use too many other programs while you're using it, and it should be just fine. That's great. All right. So thank you very much to our wonderful audience who have answered numerous questions alongside our discussion this evening. Now let's get on to a slightly different topic, and that will be, how does Git work? And then how can we use Git on our software projects? I'm going to open up a terminal, and again, I'm warning you, this is only to demonstrate how Git works. It's not for you to necessarily have to learn these commands, because the commands I'm doing here are going to be done in the background by your computer. If you are interested in computer terminal work, which is a very powerful tool, then you are most welcome to follow along and try it. These commands can be replicated in Windows on Git Bash. It's a program that comes with your Git installation. And in Mac, you can go to search and for the terminal, and then you can do these commands in the terminal. It is possible that you may have to install Git. I have seen different Macs with different configurations from different countries. Sometimes they have to install Git, but it will, if you type in Git and it's not there, it will give you an option to install as long as you know your computer's password. And this is the Linux terminal. It most closely mimics the Mac terminal, but the commands that you use in Git Bash on Windows are very, very similar. So I have my repository of Git projects in my Documents GitHub folder, and I can change there to a different directory. CD is change directory. I think what I will do, I'm not going to list these all right here, but I may put up for you a few shortcuts that you may like for working in Git Bash, because it can help you to solve problems if you're not quite sure what's happening with your Git. With your Git sharing and or repository. Sometimes it's not working as you might expect, and these commands may be able to help you. ls is another such command, list. And I have a few projects that I have downloaded as Git repositories. One notable one is our Java coding one, and that's the one where I'm sharing our code from the previous weeks, changing directory into our Java coding, and list. And I have November 1, November 8th, and October 25th. I've just created a new November 8th folder, and I'm going to put a few files in there, hopefully by the end of this session. Go down to November 8th, change directory, November 8th. And now I am in the November 8th directory. I already put a file in there, and it's just a testing file. So on your computer, you can do several things. Sometimes you can use a command line editor, but you don't have to. For example, if I want to put a new file here, I don't have to do it through the command line. I can just go through to my documents in GitHub. And then in here, I could go to Java coding, for example, and November 8th and new file. Oh, it's only allowing me to do new folders in this one. So I can use another program, I suppose. Some kind of text editor. And so let's say I had a file that I had edited in, say, Notepad or some kind of text editor. Be careful if you edit it in a word processor, there may be extra formatting. This is just a text file editor program. And I can go to save it on Documents, GitHub, and Java coding. And here we are, November 8th. And make a new file, testing2.txt. And there we go. And now I have testing2, another file. And I should be able to now go back here. And there are the two files, testing and testing2. Now I could have used my command line to edit it, and that's for a whole other lesson. But suffice it to say, as long as you know where your files are, you can use whatever editing program that you need to do these files. And there it is, testing and testing2. There are two new files. So let's say I was doing some computer programming and I just finished editing this testing2. Now, how am I going to upload this to my online repository? So the first thing I can do is check the status of my Git repository. This is important because when I save a file, it is saved to a branch. Right now I'm on the master branch, and that's something that should be warned against as well. This is just for an example. You would rarely work on the master branch. In fact, I should not have done that. I should actually create a new branch. And that's a very important thing to keep track of, because if you're editing the master branch and someone else is too, that will eventually cause some issues. So I'm going to try this, git branch project one. Now git status. And now, oh, I'm still on branch master. So what I can do is git checkout project one. Now it says I've switched to branch project one. Now when I do git status, then I'm on branch project one. Okay, and it allowed me to keep this newly edited file. So if I forget to switch onto a separate branch, well, it forgave me there, but you have to be very careful with Git. It's a good idea to just check out the project branch before you begin editing files. Edit your files, and now it's showing that one of my files has been modified from previously. So I want to update this now to my repository online. And there are 3 commands to do this. So I will provide a sort of a reference for these. So don't try to write them down. Just sort of look at the big picture for the moment. And this happens inside your VS Code as well when you do the Git updating from in the VS Code. These files or these commands are done in the background. So git add all files. That means all files that I have modified. It's a capital A. That means all the files that I have added are now, it's sort of like telling the passengers on an airplane to get into the waiting room. And they're going for a flight. They're going to wait in the waiting room first. And that means all passengers get to the waiting room. Okay, git commit with a message. And since I modified testing 2, I'm just saying that's in the message. And here's a little analogy. Now boarding the plane. You wouldn't put this in your Git messaging, but this is essentially what we're doing. By committing the file, you're saying it's going to be going up onto the internet. And it's the same thing as a passenger getting on a plane. That passenger is committing to go on a journey. And once the journey stops, in general, there's no turning back. All right. So now my passenger is on the plane. That one file I modified, testing 2, is on the plane, so to speak, ready to now go on to its destination. Git push. We push our Git changes onto the internet. And origin is the location on the internet where the files are found, and it's set in my computer already. And I have a bad habit of updating to master, but we are doing project 1. And let's see what happens. Wow, it's on the internet. Now let's prove that it's on the internet. We'll go to our GitHub. Here's our Java coding repository. And this pull-down menu at the moment only has 2 branches, the main and the master branch. What I'm going to do is update it by refreshing the screen. Now when I go there, there's project 1. And project 1 has those 2 files, testing and testing 2. And there's my testing 1, 2, 3, very brief sort of modifications here. All right, so that was the process of updating to the internet. Now, when we're sharing a project across when we're sharing it across a team, then sometimes there are some other modifications that happen, and we'll see how to bring those onto your computer. Just turning to the commentary here. And yes, I didn't do a git init, and maybe I will do that. Thank you, Mahir, as I had already initialized that particular project. And I also sometimes git initting it's a little awkward getting it all connected up to the repository online. So I may come back to initting. And so add dot. And I think what dot means is everything in this particular directory. And yes, git bash is case sensitive in any operating system. So I think git add dot will apply to the particular folder. It may not work in files outside of that particular folder, but I may be wrong because dot generally means all the files in a particular folder, the current folder. And I think git is also very, well, it's used by professionals and beginners alike. So there are numerous possible ways to do the git. So you could probably do git add dot or git add a, and probably several other ways as well. And that is a good point. Testing 2 is used to update testing 2. There is a case sensitive issue, as I spelled one with a capital and one without, perhaps. And is there any advantage to committing a program through git bash rather than doing it in VS Code? And once you have it set up in VS Code, it's quite straightforward, and there's only a few interactions. However, knowing what's happening in the background can help you to troubleshoot issues. And sometimes you can pull open a git bash terminal and be able to understand what's happening in the background. I think the reason I'm doing this is there are a few concepts in Git that you need to know. You need to know what branch you're on. You need to know how to merge branches and what's happening when you're merging branches. And just be aware of the issues that can happen in Git. And if you search on the internet, you will find numerous humorous anecdotes as to why Git may not work in some cases. So it is well worth time just understanding a little bit about how Git works. Okay, so I have now updated my project, but what about if someone on my coding team updates the project? Well, here's someone online, and I'm just doing a little bit of editing here, this line. Okay, I just did a slight edit. This line was edited online, and I should be able to commit my changes. And there, I've directly committed it to this particular branch, project 1. And now I can go back to my computer here and do a git pull. And let's see. Did it just update that? Yes, testing 2. Oh no, that didn't do that. It gave me an error here. Okay, now my testing 2 has been uploaded. So sometimes you can just pull a git pull and it will work. And in this case, it made me do a git pull origin project 1. So go to the origin, which is the online location of my files. And then project 1 is the branch on which I'm working. And you'll see now, if I open up my testing 2 program, this line was edited online. So I've now downloaded that change. Okay, and one final little thing that I will show. What if someone was working on project 1 and now the group has agreed that that project 1 branch is going to now be the main branch? Well, what I can do is go to the main branch, in this case, master branch, and I will merge the changes from the project 1 branch. So git checkout master and git status. You don't have to do this, but this is always good to check and verify you're on a particular branch. Now, if I list, you see now there's only one file, testing.txt. My testing 2 got incorporated into the other branch. But now I want to make my testing 2 file part of the main branch. I'm going to do this, git merge and testing 2. Oh, sorry, project 1. I'm merging the branch name, not the file name. There we are. And now if I list, the testing 2 is there. But it is now just like I've done this modification by hand. I have to incorporate it into the actual branch by doing this, git add. I'm going to try this, git add with the current directory, just like it was suggested in the chat, and git commit with a message merging project. Actually, I should spell it exactly the same, project 1 branch. Good. And nothing to commit. Oh, that's strange. And git push origin master. Okay, if I go online now and refresh, and I go to my master branch, now I have in the master branch testing and testing 2. And if I go here, I have testing and testing 2. It's now been incorporated into the master branch. All right, it gave me a message though. I'm not sure why. It didn't say that there was anything to commit, but it may be because I had previously added this file. I'm not sure. At any rate, it has now merged and I've done this. So I've shown you how to do this manually. When you do this on VS Code, you will be doing it automatically. But if there are issues, sometimes you can do something like this, git pull origin master, git push. Sometimes pushing and pulling does the trick if there is an issue, and that can also be done from VS Code. Going here, you see there's a little branch, source control, and I can initialize a repository and I can publish it to GitHub. There are ways to do that automatically here. If you get a GitHub account, you may be able to experiment with these very features. And it is advised that you may want to do a few tutorials on GitHub, as you need to be a little cautious in the beginning so you know what you're doing and you're fully aware that you're working on a particular branch at a particular time. And if someone else is working with you on a team, particularly to ensure you don't step on each other's toes. A word of caution, for example, if you're working on the same branch and you modify the same files and then try to merge them, well, here's one of my favorite Git films or memes shown to me by my students. Here's why you have to be very careful when merging Git. Don't worry, it's not that bad. That is a case where pretty much every Git file was conflicting with every other Git file. The message is that when working with Git, work with caution, work as a team, coordinate, work in separate folders if possible, and then that will help you to avoid certain things like that. When that does happen, it is possible to make some modifications that will help you to overcome that. And maybe I'll show that in a future session. What if I change one file on one repository and I change the same file in another location and then try to merge the two? We can look at ways to overcome that. There will be some code in the files showing which parts of the code are belonging to which version of the branch. And we can look at that and see how we can overcome that. All right, so that's a little bit about Git. And worry not, you don't have to know those command line items. The command line was just a good way to show you what's happening in the background and to let you appreciate some of the thought process behind Git, because you're going to be automatically doing it from your VS Code. Okay. Back to our Java introduction. And we did a little bit about GitHub, and we did talk very briefly about branches, adding, committing, and pushing and pulling, using the status, and of course, merging. And there was a final caution about merging, as you saw. All right. Our cooperation. I did let you know last time the limited market game. I'm almost ready for us to maybe play the limited market game. Perhaps in next week's session, we'll do that. And that will be leading us towards this process. Maybe next week we will play as human players. We'll have a few volunteers to play. And then our task in our cooperation will be to create some autonomous players. Each autonomous player will be simply a Java method that we upload and will be part of a larger code repository. Very much the same as when you need to write an autonomous routine for your robot. You make a Java method and you put it to override the autonomous method that's already there in the robot class. And the participating individuals and teams will take information about the game into their method and then send a floating point number between 0 and 100, not inclusive of the endpoints, as the output. And so long as your method does that, then it will be a member of that cooperation, and we'll see what happens. All right, and so something for us to keep in mind. Our remote code testing, and this is what I have in mind, using GitHub, as you saw, I can make some changes and then I can upload. And then if I'm on another computer somewhere, I can download it. In fact, I can show that process right now on my separate computer. Let me just try that. So how is our remote testing going to work? Let's try one more VS Code project. Go back to these files here. Create a new project. This time, I'm going to use maybe a template, a Java template. Let's do the basic timed robot. And this time, the base folder will be our Git repository. We go here to GitHub and Java coding. November 8th, and let's try putting it in here. New folder, timed robot example. Further advice, if you start jumping around directories, remember which one you're using. As you note, I'm naming this timed robot example the same as another folder somewhere else on my computer. That could be dangerous, so I should put here coding session, just so I know which one. That's just mentioning a little addition to one of the previous question replies. That is, be careful of what you name your folders and where you put them. Okay, so this folder at least gives us a little bit of indication about where and when it was created. I'm going to select this folder, project name, sample timed robot coding session. And generating the project, yes. All right, I just did an update there. Let's go back to my Git. I'm going to Git branch robot code. Timed robot, how about that? Okay, so now I have my timed robot coding session. That's a whole directory. I'm going to do a git add all files instead of just the dot, as this will just ensure that the subfolders are there. Not sure if that works or not with the dot. Everyone can let me know, because I've never actually tried the dot. But I do know this does work. All right, and you can see it created a whole bunch of files there, because those are all the different files that are part of that timed robot project. And git push origin master. Oh, sorry, this one is timed robot. Great, and that's uploaded now. Now I can do the git checkout the master and git merge timed robot. Let's assume that the row code has been checked and it's all fine. And git add a again. Now I'm adding it to the, for a little view here, I'm adding it to the branch master. So I just added a git commit with a message. I'm merging the timed robot branch, and the name of it is timed robot, specific with a capital on the R in the timed robot, into the master branch. And now git push origin master. Now, I didn't actually do a update to the timed robot branch, and we can prove this. I'm going to go and share on my other computer. Let me just share here. And I'll go to the GitHub. See if this works. Okay, I just signed in. And if I go to my repository, Java coding, I can see the main branch comes up. That's the default. The master branch should have the timed robot example coding session. It's there. But if I actually go to the timed robot, oh, it updated it as well. Okay, was not sure about that. However, I was going to do that manually. So it appears that even though I was on the master branch, it updated the side branch as well. So Git is keeping track of everything and taking care of us. So I didn't have to do that update again, as it's already been done. And now I can download this code repository on this computer. For example, I don't have Git installed on this computer yet. I could probably just install it. I can do this Git for Windows. Download. I don't think the download takes all that long to install. Let's see how long that takes to install. Should be just any moment here. It's half done already. And I'm installing the Git for Windows. And if you read quickly, that's good. If not, well, hopefully everything is fine. And it's installing Git. There we go. Next, next. Okay, okay. Usually the defaults are just fine. And there it is installing the once the Git for Windows is installed, I should be able to access a program called Git Bash. And that should allow me to do those same command line commands that were being done on the other computer here. There we are. It seems to have been installed. And launch Git Bash. That's nice. There we are. So I can show you two ways to get a code repository on your computer. Whoops, there's some release notes there. Don't need that for the moment. Now let's go back to our FRC Canada. You'll see that there's Java coding. There's the repository. And in the repository, there is a way to clone a Git repository. I just copied that link. I can do it through HTTPS, SSH, and GitHub command line. I'm actually going to try it probably. I'm not sure. I haven't tried that GitHub command line. Let me just try the one I tried before. Okay, And we will go to git bash. I can use Control and Shift and plus to make the text larger. It just makes it easier to see. And I can do this, git clone. And Control and Shift are required to paste with a Control V. Oops, did that work? Or maybe in Windows, it's right click and paste. Sorry, that only works in some operating systems. In Windows, you have to right click to be able to paste. And there we go. HTTPS is not supported. That may be why we have GitHub command line. Let me try that one. Copy that, go back here and paste it. And it doesn't like that one either. Let's just try this one. And this one is also not going to work because I haven't set it up on this computer. So I may have to abandon my attempt to show you on this computer. It will work once you have set your computer up. Oh, it is working. Okay, nice. Cloning into Java coding. Now there's a little security feature. It's basically saying there's a security connection on this file. It's using like secure shell, SSH. And you have to continue connecting with a yes. And its permission is denied. That's what I was suspicious of. I have to set up this computer with a special key like I did last week. And so maybe in the meantime, I will do that. Or in another session, we'll have a chance to do that. Okay, so suffice it to say, you can use the git command line to do that. I can also just do this. I'm going to just try going to HTTPS here and code. I think there should be a download. Yeah, download zip. This is another way to do that. Just save the file. And the download's happening here. And there's all my file contents from my repository, Java coding main. Oh.
We're not seeing anything, William.
Oh, so sorry, I unshared. All right, what I just did, I went to download all the file contents. For example, if I want to get my master branch, then I can click on download zip and save the file like this. And it's saving. Once I've saved it, then I can unzip it, extract all to the downloads location, I suppose. And in there, I should now find all of the files, the November 8th files here. There's the timed robot example. So like I mentioned, you don't need to know all the git commands. I only showed them so you can just appreciate some of the things happening in the background. And you may use the commands as a troubleshooting method if that comes down to a issue with your repository not working. I've now downloaded the code onto this computer and I can begin working on it. I have to set it up a little to make it work with Git. We will work on that a little bit more in a future session. All right, now there are some chat items here. So let's go through some of the commentary in the chat. Whoa. And David has noted that you can use the website to commit, and you can very well go to any file here, for example, and edit it and put your own code there and commit directly to the website. That is another issue or another way to do that. So there are numerous ways to work with Git. You can find one with which you're convenient. And yeah, Noah has pointed out it is very convenient to upload and update through VS Code, and I'll show that in a future session, perhaps next week. Yes, and you also need to have an account login, and you may need to set up your computer's security features to work with the Git terminal, as you saw there. In order to overcome that, I'm going to have to install the security keys from this computer on my Git account, and I'll show that again next week. Yes, and David is quite correct. Using the website for uploading is more straightforward, but also connecting it to your VS Code will have its advantages. Yes, and there's a very good point here. If everyone has GitHub accounts on the team, then GitHub will work seamlessly, especially if you've connected it in with VS Code. That's why I'm spending a fair amount of time on GitHub, as it is a very good way to accelerate your team's process work in creating computer code. And it allows for exactly like what I'm seeing in the chat here. You don't have to do it, but it's like you make the changes, upload them to your GitHub account, check them out there, and when you're happy, you can merge them into the team's repository. And for that matter, your coders can be in an entirely different location coding the robot, and someone can be in the room with the robot and download directly onto the driver station computer from GitHub to get the robot working. Lots of great opportunities once you're using the GitHub. So if you want the download to go right into VS Code, we can show that in a little bit of a moment. And the main branch is empty. You have to go to the other ones. Main is a new sort of default in GitHub. It used to default to master, so I was working in master. Yes, and that's it. So I switched, I switched to the traditional master, even though main is the new default. It's not that you shouldn't be using Git bash at all. You don't have to use it. It's just that you may use it in certain circumstances to do some more detailed troubleshooting of your Git repository. And it's just an alternate way to understand what Git is and how it works. Yeah, just another way. Great. Oh yeah, and Mahir has made a very good point. Whenever changes happen, you have to be aware. It caught me off guard a little when it put main there, and I said, what's happening? That's not master, I just made master. And I didn't even become aware until recently that now main is the way to go. So if you were trying to update to master, but there's only a main, it's going to give you an issue, as the comment said there. Great, so there's lots of great commentary about the use of Git there. Thank you once again to our audience members for filling in the rich discussion about Git. And so to summarize, you don't really have to use the Git bash, but you may use it for troubleshooting and more detailed Git work. And you can use it to do some configuration of your computer's security settings and your Git interaction with the internet and the like. And it can be very helpful. I tend to use it a lot, even though I don't have to. I just have developed that habit and it just works for me. But if you go into your VS Code, you may be able to do your Git work much more quickly. And just to quickly summarize that, in this here, we basically press this check mark to add all and to commit. And then up here, you can do your pull and your push and your clone and your commit and all kinds of the things I showed you this evening. Now you have an idea of what they are, and they can be done here. You may want to look into what is stash. That can be an issue. If you're switching between branches, sometimes you have to stash changes on one branch to work on another. And so there are a few more concepts to work out. Great. Oh, there's the checkout. You can check out to a new branch, for example. All the things I showed you are now able to be done in the VS Code. So maybe we'll try to set up this VS Code with Git next week. And so you can try that on your computer as well. If there are any questions, very happy to answer. If anyone would like to do any installation of a troublesome software package, glad to do that as well. And whatever you would like to go through. Oh yeah, still downloading. That is a common issue, and it's 1.5 or more gigabytes. Well, yes, the internet, it does take its time in some places. But okay, so there's an interesting question. I downloaded the WPI lib. Which file should I unzip into where? Okay, so let me just share my Windows computer again. Downloads. Okay, so there's my WPI lib download. If I just click on it, it looks like I can just work with these files like regular. But this is actually a download in a format of a CD or DVD drive. So I'm going to right click it and then mount it as if it's an imaginary disk. Now it's actually a separate drive, drive F. It's like I installed a physical hard drive, drive F, but it's actually a virtual hard drive or maybe a virtual DVD drive. And I can go to the WPI lib installer and just double click it. Now I'm assuming, this is Liam's question, that's a Windows machine. If it's a Mac, I'm not quite sure. And you may probably just double click on the WPI lib itself. It is Windows. Okay, so in this case, I'll just show that one more time. I'm going to go here and unconnect or disconnect, unmount the drive, eject. There it is. And we can go to our downloads. Right click, mount as a virtual drive, and then you double click on the WPI lib installer. A very good point. Yes, once it finishes, you can eject it. The main versus master, I think that's a really good point to keep in mind, because this happens in many areas of computer science. You always have to be aware, if possible, of new changes. And the almost every tutorial in the last 10 years will probably use master as the default branch. Whereas if they changed it to main, now you have to remember that main is the default branch. Well, I overcame that in mine by just installing or creating a master branch and pretending it was the master branch. So a very good point to Kate. I'll have to read up and understand the implications of this new main. There may be a rationale behind it. I'm not sure why they did that. Well, it will definitely keep you on your toes and keep you aware of the importance of updating your understanding of new technologies. An interesting point, mimicking Java, the main class. In this case, I don't know if there would be an analog here, because this branch idea is just a collection of code which is done by a particular user that will be maybe connected to another branch. So these are actually different branches of the same code base, not necessarily in the way that main is the main class of Java, though that is a very good point, because main class is one of the most important classes to learn in the beginning of Java programming. So with that, our presentation for this evening is now finished. I'm really looking forward to your participation, hopefully in our interactive parts. Next week, I'm going to have an interactive game to get us started on our Coopertition. And I'm hoping that if there's any team that has access to an FRC robot, we may be able to cooperate together and test some of your computer code. We could do that live, or we could do it asynchronously. For example, one week, the participants may upload onto our shared GitHub repository some computer code for a robot, and then we'll have that computer code tested by a team that has access to a robot. Any teams that have a robot, they may volunteer to this process. That would be most appreciated. Otherwise, we'll see what kind of arrangements we may make. All right. So the drive, I think it doesn't really matter which robot it is, because we can adapt it. If it has a drive base, then we can do some controller controlling the drive base coding. Or if it does have some mechanisms, that's okay. But it also depends on how those mechanisms are connected. We wouldn't want a robot that could easily be broken by bad code. So for example, when we tested our robot in our computer lab or our robotics lab, we put it up on blocks so that the wheels didn't really affect anything. And sometimes we just had loose, or we had special motors just set up just to test whether they're working, so that robot arms weren't swinging about and causing an issue. So whatever robot it is, it should be some robot that can be operated safely without damaging the robot or causing any issues of safety to those around, especially if an inexperienced coder may have a very creative way of solving a problem that could create unintended consequences. Great. So thank you. And if you do have something, Mike, that would be most appreciated. Maybe we might be in touch by email in a little bit. And with that, I hope everyone has a wonderful evening and hope to see everyone very soon.
Thanks. Have a good night, everyone.
Good evening.